Welcome, everyone. This is the Community Jameel and afikra conversation series for COP28. My name is Wesam Asali. I'm an architect and assistant professor at the School of Architecture and Design at IE University in Spain. I'm also the co-founder of my Damascus-based architecture practice, IW Lab. This episode will focus on the local knowledge of building and sustainability, a topic that it's my main focus in practice and research. We're going to focus on the Mediterranean and Pakistan. And in this session, we will look at how architecture can be a lens through which we address the challenges posed by the climate crisis. And I could not have a better company, an expert, to discuss this matter than my guest in this conversation, the Pakistani architect Yasmeen Lari. Yasmeen Lari is Pakistan's first female architect. She's also an architectural historian, heritage specialist, philanthropist, and humanitarian architect, a term that I hope we will discuss in this conversation. She's also a co-founder of Heritage Foundation of Pakistan. She graduated from Oxford Brookes University and pursued a very successful practice in Pakistan, where she built several landmarks before she retired from architectural practice in its conventional form, which I think we will also tap on this in this conversation. She worked then as a UNESCO consultant and focused her intervention in post-disaster housing. Since the earthquake in Pakistan 2005, she has devised various programs of structures and sustainable buildings with thousands of post-disaster shelters built with local material in the countries. Yasmeen has received many awards and recognitions, like the Hilal al-Imtiyaz from the Presidency of Pakistan and the Royal Gold Medal in 2023 awarded by the Royal Institute of British Architects. So let me start with a very practical questions. What keeps you busy these days? What are your projects right now? What are you doing?
Right now, what I really want is, I want somehow that, at least in my country, there should be no displacement when a disaster strikes. Because I've seen so much of it, and I find that they never can get resettled. Once they leave their abode, they are driven out of it. It's more or less almost impossible to come back and restart your lives and get back to normal. Because before you do that, you are struck with another disaster. And that's why architecture can play a very important role in seeing that you build in a manner that is climate resilient. If we can do that, then women and children will not be having to go in and camp in the middle of nowhere on a high ground. And I think that is my main concern. And that's what I would like now to happen after last year's disaster, when 33 million of my people have been displaced because of the flood. And where 3 million families need not only shelter, but food and security and livelihood. It's all interrelated, right?
Absolutely. And this leads me to the question about the role of architects that you tapped on. And I would like you to elaborate on the role of architects and emphasizing specifically on this plurality, because it seems like it has been disregarded lately, and architects are only considered as creative members. So can you elaborate on the role of architects in their immediate communities?
Sure. I feel very strongly about how architects can serve humanity today. Because there's a great need for good designers to be able to have an improved environment for living, for everybody. And so far, the way the profession has progressed, and I find that, I was trained in the last century. You must know that, I was trained, I graduated in 1964. And it was a long time ago. But what I was taught at that time, I find many architecture schools are still pursuing the same kind of curriculum. Architects are still being trained to only work for the wealthy and for their own egos primarily, of course, as well. With the result that they don't feel that they have a role to play in what's happening around the world, whether it's climate change, whether it's SDGs, whether it's poverty. As a profession, we don't feel connected to that because we feel that we were trained for something more, something, better. But there is no better when majority of humanity today is suffering in that way, and when design can play such a crucial role. So I find that today the profession must change if it wants to remain relevant in the future. And we need to see how, and I know that young architects, such as yourself and your group and many others, are really keen today to see what they can do beyond what they were taught in terms of serving the elite or the wealthy. And I think that's where it is now. That's what we have to do, is how to expand these horizons, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we're discovering a very important issue that's been overlooked in the past, which is the act of architecturing, if you may, is building. And it seems that we're discovering that the act of construction really goes beyond translating designs into realities at any cost. It's not valid. This argument is somewhat not valid anymore because construction is intertwined with social and environmental impact that should be aware of. And I find your construction processes that you do in your projects, you approach construction with great seriousness, sensitivity. And what I think is a very interesting topic to expand on, you have a keen interest in listening to the people who build and inhabit your project before you build them. So how do you approach building? What are the key points that the architect should consider when contemplating construction?
Yeah, because, I've been fortunate, although it's been, of course, tragedy for my country that we've had so many disasters. But not every architect or every professional gets a chance to work in disaster areas. But because Pakistan has been confronted with either earthquakes or floods on a recurring basis, almost every second year, and I've had the chance to be able to work in all those areas where these calamities have happened. And also because I'm a woman, so I've had great possibility of interaction with women in these areas who normally are totally left behind. Nobody bothers about them. So I've had this kind of great advantages, if you like. And I want to use my skills to see how I can improve people's lives. It's not building structures, it's building lives, really, that's important. And architects can play a very significant role in this because, we all train to be good designers, hopefully, because that's something that without it you can't really survive. But that design tool is so important when you have restricted resources, because you can make the best use of waste, best use of whatever you have available. You don't need to go out somewhere to do it. So everything that we talk about sustainability in terms of use of local materials, local expertise, local, whatever positive elements are available for you, you will use them. As an architect, you have the skill and the potential to be able to do it well. That's why we need many architects. We need really good architects, good designers to be in the field. And today I was discussing, and they were discussing with me about corruption in countries like mine and many others like us. And really, if you build in this manner, not only are you helping, of course, to save the resources of the planet, but also you're also talking of zero corruption. Yeah. Which means all the money that's available is being invested for people's welfare, not for somebody else's welfare. So I think it's very important for us to now just forget about funds from everywhere. Try to see what the resources are, and good architects should be in the field to see how they can mobilize, whether it's your waste resources, whether it's the natural resources, or whether it's the human resources. This profession is the best trained to do so, because you know how to use the context, you know how to use whatever is available, and you know how to coordinate and collaborate. So why aren't all the architects now in that field of humanitarianism? You tell me, Wesam.
That's a fantastic question, which I actually thought to ask you. you, you,
Yeah.
you did that for me, but I think like I've been in when I was preparing for this conversation, I actually I reread, I have to say, a Guardian article, which was an interview with you, and you mentioned that you see charity is a colonial heritage in the region, which I totally agree. So I think there is also this global dynamics that also influence how projects are seen in what they call developing countries. I'm really glad you tapped on zero fund policy, which is, I have to say, I think from our practice is not easy, but it requires long-term commitment. How do you describe this long commitment? What keeps you pushing forward to continue pursuing all these phases one after another?
Well, that's a very complicated question. But I think the fact is that, I think we have to divide our professionals into two groups. One are those who made it and who are now secure. And I think the time has come for them to pay back with all their services, with pro bono work for society. Mm. Then there are the young professionals who are just starting off. They are committed to doing something good, but obviously they can't afford it. So we have to find ways to see how they can earn by doing good also, not only working for the wealthy. Mm. So I happen to be, again, in a very fortunate position where I'm able to give back. And I feel committed to giving back. Because as long as I was in my ivory tower as a practicing architect and earning, I didn't feel the need to help others. But once I decided to abdicate from that particular way of doing things, I learned about injustices that I never knew existed before. Once you get to know about those injustices and about things that are wrong in society, you can't turn a blind eye and say, well, it's got nothing to do with me. Of course, it's got something to do with you. You've got to do whatever you can to make it right. Mm-hmm. Whether you do it or are able to or not, I don't know, but you've got to give your best try. So that's all that I'm trying to do. I've got a target of rehabilitating 1 million households by end of next year. But even at that rate, it'll be 6 years before all the 3 million can be housed or can start living properly. So our effort today, and my team that's very dedicated, our effort is today to do that. And what I found was that once I began on my zero donor model, which we started off in April of this year, that it was so much easier because we were imparting knowledge to those who just wanted to know how to do it. They didn't have any money. They didn't have anything. They have no resources. They have only maybe 1 meal a day, if that's possible. But because we have trained some of those people who had actually been in the same state a few months ago, they'd gone through the same adversity. Those teams are going and helping others to rise above all that.
What's the role of research on your work?
Well, again, I've been very fortunate somehow because I was brought up at a time when we were still very much influenced by the colonial ways of colonial culture and everything to do with the ruling classes. And so I went to study, and again, in the UK, at Oxford Brookes University, and I had no idea about my own culture. So when I came back, I had to relearn about myself and my own culture, where I understood that there were so many very important lessons that I had not known, or I didn't know the strength of our own culture. And, that opened my eyes to so many things. And similarly, when we talk about construction and building, there are, of course, so many different traditions that have been there, but also in terms of old towns, the medieval towns that we all have. And there's so much to learn from them for our today's, if you want to make sustainable urban design, or if you want to do ecological design, well, that's where you have to look at our old these settlements, these beautiful towns that were built. And so I think always tradition. And then because I worked so much with the heritage conservation, I just learned to look at all those carefully. And somehow vernacular architecture had always fascinated me. So I'd been doing those studies, like the wind catchers of Tata, this old town with the beautiful ways of, again, natural cooling systems. And so it's all there for us just to see if we can just forget about what we've been taught in our schools, because mostly it's all about contemporary kind of ways of doing things, which are very wasteful. So it's a way of going back and learning about oneself. And you'll find in every region, in every country, there are lessons that we can apply today.
In the context of COP28 conference, now that governments are meeting, for example, to discuss this, what role do governments play to ensure the scalability? And how can we make sure we start to these discussions about building regulations to go beyond the conventional reinforced concrete centered design and construction?
Yeah, I think COP28 can play a very crucial role because it's represented by governments, by politicians. Like the politicians who decide what kind of environment we should be living in. Yeah. So I think we just the politicians have to realign their own thinking. There has to be a paradigm shift. Like I feel there has to be a paradigm shift in the humanitarian kind of field. Similarly, a paradigm shift among the mindsets of the politicians to now move away from the symbols of being sort of so prosperous, because you are no longer prosperous when you have poverty levels of more than 50% living below the poverty line. What are we building these high-rise symbols for? High carbon and use of concrete should be absolutely minimized. Steel and cement, as you know, are the worst polluters in terms of carbon emissions. Yeah. So as architects, I feel that we really carry a huge responsibility. All those professions involved in urban or built environment, or any built environment, even rural, need to realign their thinking. Must do that. And we must become, as I keep on saying, must become activists. Why are we passively accepting everything that's told to us? Unless we become champions of, I don't know, whatever you like, whether it's eco-urbanism, whether it's or sustainable construction, whatever you like, but become an activist. Fight for the cause. Otherwise, things will just carry on as usual. COPs will happen one after the other, as they have been happening for the last so many years. Where is your 1.5 limit, 1.5 centigrade limit of temperature? We haven't got it yet. In the foreseeable future, do we get it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of how sustainability has been approached for the last 2 decades, it was all gadget based, right? Like you do this electronic things that transfer something into something, and that has been a focus for many years. But again, it's kind of proving that those are localized solutions that cannot address the calamity that we're facing when it comes to the climate crisis in general. You tapped on informal construction. We've done a small research in Damascus, and we thought of introducing informal construction as a form of a vernacular construction, but it's antagonized and pushed to the limit. It's antagonized because it has been deprived from its local materials. It's been deprived from being, it's built in haste. It's built very quickly. So it is self-built architecture that could be, if architects played a role in these type of dwelling, it could be improved way better than the current conditions that they are.
Oh, absolutely. Wissam, I think architects must now start focusing on these issues, because we can't say you bring back the traditional kind of way of building from the rural to the urban area. The urban area now has a different landscape altogether. But within that, you have to see how do you best use the resources, reuse the materials that are available. There's a very good term called urban mining, which means that you take the materials that are available and you see how you then put them to good use. But I think in the final analysis, what's important is to see how you can give everybody a safe structure to live in. Finally, we have to save lives. We're not trying to save buildings. So we need to see how we can get there and tell them, and we need a better quality of life for everybody, for their well-being, for their health, for being inclusive with women and children, And we need food security everywhere. So why can't cities become the place where you start growing? Everybody can start growing food everywhere. And that's why I want women in the forefront, because they will do it.
Yeah.
So all of it is possible. I mean, finally, cities are really the most dynamic places, but people there are really innovative and they will do things. They just need a direction. I mean, I'm finding this. I'm working in Karachi now. We've taken up a couple of projects, and I find everybody is interested to do something to make it better. But you need architects to be in the forefront. Everybody needs guidance. We need those good designers to go there and say, okay, we'll help you to do it. Come and join hands.
That leads me to the last question, which is it ends in a more promising kind of note. I mean, this initiative between Community Jameel and Afikra is dedicated to reaching young people.
Right.
In my teaching experience, I've observed a prevalent concern about environmental change among young architects and architecture students, which is very promising. You have been in many academic institutions. The last one is the University of Cambridge, where you served as the Marshall Professor for Sustainable Design. Fantastic. So as someone with this experience, extensive experience in practice and academia as well, I want to end this conversation with a message to young architects and architecture students, maybe those working in our regions, in the Middle East, in North Africa, and the Mediterranean, but also those who are working in the global South in general.
Of course, as you must know, when they announced this RIBA gold medal, Royal Gold Medal, it came as a total surprise to me, right? Because I never expected that anybody, I pride myself, I was given this particular title called Architect for the Poorest of the Poor. I got so many messages of empathy, of real kind of, feelings for something that I'm doing from young architects that I cannot begin to tell you, from all classes of society, from professors down to everybody. But what was most touching were these messages of pride, that they thought it was a good thing that I got this. And I was just really surprised how I can help them to be able to achieve their goal. And that's what I would like them to do, is to never lose sight of the good they can do to humanity, because they are the ones who will change the world. So go ahead and do it.
Excellent. That's fantastic, Yasmeen. It's been really a pleasure and an honor to have this conversation with you. And hopefully this will lead to many more conversations. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for watching.